I've noticed and introduce Ed from Davenport, Iowa.
Good evening. My name's Ed Mutum, and I'm an alcoholic. By the grace of God, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and sponsorship, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink or a mood-altering chemical since January 5th of 1971, and for that I'm extremely grateful. And I just need to tell you the most important things I know in my life, and I want to share them up front, and that's that I love God, I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I absolutely love being sober. And I don't care what anybody thinks about it, you know. There was a long time in AA where I felt uncomfortable telling people I was happy and feeling good, because after all, then I'd have to give up some of my defects and self-obsession, wouldn't I? I want to thank David and Beth. You guys have been wonderful. It really touches my life when people volunteer to be a host, because I enjoy each and every moment of my life. And they give 3 days of their life to me. I don't take that lightly. They could be doing a lot of different things. To all you volunteers here who work so hard, especially you new people, you're doing the right thing. And you people who've been around to set the example, I want to thank you. I want to thank Lisa and the committee and everybody involved with me being here. I have witnessed this weekend a convention of love. And it's all about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm really, really honored and privileged to be here. I want to thank John, the taper over there. He reminded me of how long the tape will run, so you might ask him, John, it might help. But I'm delighted to be here, and I love John. I love what he does, you know. I've been around so long, I remember when they used to tape your reel to reel. That's been around too long when you did that. But they used to ask you all the time. But then, now they don't ask you, but that's fine. And, they used to do a permission thing and all that. And for years I was annoyed. Well, they don't even ask you anymore. And I had kind of a thing about tapers in my heart and my mind. Never told anybody much about it. It was just a little discomfort I like to play with. And, you know how we are. Don't tell them, be uncomfortable. Okay. Oh, pain, I'll take a pint, thank you. But I need to tell you, back in 1988, I had left California and I went back to Iowa. And I'd just been through a horrible, nasty divorce. Really had been. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and somebody called my house at 2 o'clock in the morning, like 5 times in a row. My keen alcoholic mind told me who it was, because they'd hang up. And about the 5th time I grabbed that phone and I said, "Who is this?" And a little voice said, "Is this Ed M. from AA?" And I said, "Yes, it is. Who's this?" And she told me her name, and she said, "I'm sober 5 years, and I was sitting here with a gun in my lap, and I just listened to your tape. Would you talk to me?" Since that day to this, I thank John and all the others for spreading the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I don't tell that story often. I only tell it every once in a while. And last month I was in Melbourne, Florida, and I told that story with Lee down there who does it. And after my talk, a young lady came up to me and shook my hand and said, "I'm that lady. Thank you for talking to me." You know? So, you do good work. Keep it up. And David and Beth, your graciousness, your love, and your service, I will always remember. And there's a lot of people here I love. Mogi, stand up a minute. This is my friend Mogi. I like to think of him as mini me. Yeah. And I got a lot of friends here. There's a lot of Julies in South Carolina. Was there a run for a while? Name her Julie. Heck, everybody's Julie. I got a lot of friends named Julie here, and just a lot of people I love. And it's nice to see John again. And Lyle gave a good talk, and I hear Stephanie did a great job today. I'm real sorry I wasn't here, and I mean that, and I will listen to her tape because that's important to me. I did something I usually don't do. When I was 10 years old, I was taken to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous by an older brother named George. And in my talks all the time, I talk about him now living in South Carolina. And he's not feeling the best. He's got Parkinson's disease and a few other things going on. But my friend David was gracious enough for me to drive me over there today so I could spend a few hours with my brother who's got 42 years sober and his wife. And I'm grateful for that. Everybody was real good right up until tonight about asking me a certain question. Al, how tall are you? Nobody did, and then the bus must have let out right out front. Al, and it's the same two questions by the same size person. Same two questions for Al, how tall are you? And I say, 6'10". How do you play basketball? No, how tall are you? 5'4". Do you play miniature golf? Seems fair to me. You guys made up the rules. I've just tried to play along. Amazing thing is, I used to think I had to do things to get attention. That's him, officer. And it's been fun. We went to a lovely dinner tonight with John and Patty and their spouses. And I just felt loved. And it's one of the things I never knew before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, for years I used to think, what has AA done for me? What has it given me? And no words would suffice. They just wouldn't. And about 5 years ago, it really became clear to me what you've given me back. And it was a gift I never knew and I never had, but I have it almost every day now. You've restored my innocence. I'm no longer guilty. I'm not a mistake. You've given me the right to be here, the right to breathe, the right to stand upright, and the right to take a position in this world. I'd never known that before. And I don't think I would have ever known it if it wasn't for the love and fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I come from a very elite group of people called white trash. You know, when you have a position in society, certain things are expected. We pretty much did them all. Yeah. You know, I laugh and joke about that now, but that was one of the toughest things for me to get over inside. I'm not talking about outside. I'm talking about inside. That sense of worthlessness, that sense of you're nothing. You're just nothing. And it took me a long time, but it was worth the wait, you know. It was absolutely worth the wait. I was born the youngest of 7 children. I was not planned, and they were annoyed by it. And my earliest memories in life were simply this. I didn't like what I saw, didn't like being there, didn't like breathing much, and it never really changed. I know I didn't like my parents, and I instinctively knew early on that you didn't say that out loud. You just didn't. It was a bad thing to do. I had a unique sense of right and wrong from a very early age, but I became very familiar with the wrong. I became an expert. I always say it's like walking into a room with 300 people. 299 could turn around to me and say, Ed, you're the best. We love you. And one could go, loser. Guess who got my full attention? From a very early age. And the problem with that, if you're a collector of ones, like I'm a collector of ones, you have to drink eventually because you keep collecting those ones and the bag gets so heavy that you got to drink. I see a lot of people do that sober with troubles we have in our lives. You know? Oh, you know what happened 2 years ago? No. What's that got to do with today? Now, I'm not trying to be rude. It's just that's what we do. We put ones in the bag, negative stuff, and carry it through life. At least I do. That's what I did. And I did for a long time sober. I remember Mom used to drag us to church. That was always fun. We like that, you know. And all ministers have thin blue lips and talk like this. And they kind of shake their finger every once in a while. You're going to burn in hell, young man. That's what you're going to do. You're going to burn in hell. Now, you got to remember, I collect ones. That's what I saw. And I remember there was one guy sitting up front. He was always sitting up front every Sunday. He had thin blue lips, too. He's probably going to be a minister. And he was sitting there so holy, and I thought, you know, I saw him in the bar last night, and he looked a lot happier. And I don't know that other woman he was with, but seemed to be having a lot more fun, too, I might add. Now, the problem with that is that's true, but you see, I judged that entire church by my one. And, you know, it just seems so obvious to me today that behind him was 299 probably of the finest people I've ever known. But you see, I had my one. I was convinced that life was full of ones. From a very early age, when you start that, you find out something real early. Alcohol eases that all up. And I wasn't like John. They used to get me drunk when I was a kid thinking it was funny. So I don't know when I took my first drink. And it really doesn't matter, but I know this. I know that eventually in my life that I drank to preserve my sanity. I drank to make life tenable. I knew if I had a few drinks, it'd be okay. I instinctively knew that. And I started using and drinking at a very early age. And I don't talk a lot about drugs, but I'm also not ashamed that I did it. Tried to throw me out of a room. But I also only introduced myself as an alcoholic because I truly understand singleness of purpose and I fully support it. But real early on, I needed something to fix. The saying used to go around years ago, you don't hear it much anymore, but I've never heard a better description. I had a hole in my gut with the wind blowing through, and I just ached. And if I had a few drinks, it kind of closed the hole. And, you know, it was okay for a while. John described it wonderfly. You know, the finances weren't a problem anymore. Anything wasn't a problem. Those guys I had to fight every day at school weren't a problem anymore. When they'd pick on me because I was wearing hand-me-down clothes, and I used to think, why do they pick on me, man? Why don't they just leave me alone? What's the deal? What did I ever do to them? And the answer is nothing. They were just mean-spirited kids. But real early on, I thought God had it out for me. Thought God made those kids beat up on me. When I was little, I had a speech impediment. I had a bad lisp. And I'd talk like this. And people laugh at me. And I don't laugh at speech impediments. I'm just sharing it with you. Because Sid Caesar used to be on TV, and I like to watch Sid Caesar rather than Fred Skelton. And everybody laughed at me when I'd say that. And they took me into class, and they put me in speech therapy. And I remember sitting in that class, and she got me playing with blocks. What's that got to do with my speech? Playing with blocks. I'd play with blocks, and she'd talking, playing with blocks. And one day she said, you don't have to come anymore. And I said, why? And she said to me, your speech impediment's gone. And I didn't know it. And it reminds me of coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. What do these steps have to do with my problem? Just work the blocks. Just pay attention. And you'll be amazed before you're halfway through, because that obsession will be lifted from you. Half of my problems are because I focus on them. More than half. And I learned that later in life in a review of that situation. When I was 13, I was arrested by the Iowa Highway Patrol for possession of a sawed-off shotgun. I was just trying to be understood, I thought. And they frown on that in Iowa. And I don't know a lot about guns, still don't. But I had a 12-gauge double barrel that was 14 and a half inches long. And this cop said, what do you use this gun for? I said, I hunt rabbits. He said, what do you do, run them down and beat them to death with it? But I was already at the point in life where nobody was going to hurt me anymore. If there was any hurting to be done, I was going to do it. And I started acting like I was tough. And I started telling a lie that took me a long time sober to quit lying about. And it was a simple lie. It was simply, I don't care. You're going to go to jail. I don't care. They're coming after you. I don't care. You're going to die drunk, please. My brother took me to my first meeting when I was 10 years old, and I got lied to right away. They started saying, if you keep drinking and using, you're going to die. And I thought, when? Because I didn't want to live. You missed the point. If I could find an easier way out, I'd take it. And when they talk about me dying drunk, I thought, cool. Because life's too tough for me. I knew all my life I was far too sensitive for this world. And I came to you and you told me I'm just right for this world. Never knew it. And I used anger and my size and a look. I had a look. I can't do my look anymore. I had a great look. You know what I mean? I can back you off 10 feet just looking at you. Can't do it anymore. I tried to work it up, but I ended up laughing, so it got worse. I remember one day I walked into a meeting with my look. Walked into a meeting, guy said to me, "How you feeling, Ed?" And I said, "Fine." He said, "Why don't you tell your face? It don't know." We get a lot of habits going, don't we? Just the way we look at people. I'm firmly convinced that Alcoholics Anonymous is about every area of my life. If I just think it's about drinking, I'm going to end up doing that again, or worse. It's got to be about every area of my life. Work, home, the way I think, the way I act. Every area of my life, I have to apply these steps on. Otherwise, I'm going to end up doing a lot of things other people do. And they end up dead, and they end up dead quick. Now, some of them end up dead slow. That's what helped get me sober, you know. I got to thinking, I got sober when I was 20 years old. And it wasn't because I was a young pup and thought, gee, I've had enough. It was because I couldn't go another step. And worrying about dying didn't bother me. Worrying about living did. I thought, you know, with my rotten luck, I may live a long time. But I came in here, I was 20 years old and 105. And there's a lot of younger people coming into AA every single day. And please don't tell them, I wish I got this when I was your age. I wish I was this sick when I was your age. Yeah, then you would have been dead 20 years ago, you know. But I mean it. They always connect addiction and disease with age, especially alcoholism. And I don't get that. Would any of us here who'd experienced cancer go into a young cancer patient, 15, 16 years old, and say, you know, my cancer was much worse than yours? But what do we do in meetings? It's exactly what we do. How dare I assume or presume the nature of their illness and the depth of it? One of the things I loved when I came to AA is people accepted me exactly as I am. Except for that first group I went to. They were a little annoyed with me. They knew my reputation and they were my people. And they asked me to leave. I said, no, we don't need your kind here. And I went up to a businessmen's meeting called Central Discussion in Davenport, Iowa, and everybody's wearing a suit. Everybody's prim and proper. I learned years ago the guy that greeted me was worth millions and millions of dollars. But you know what? I didn't know that. You know what impressed me about the guy? He looked me right in the eye and said, what's your name? And I said, Ed. He said, welcome, Ed. I'm John. You want a cup of coffee? And he welcomed me into Alcoholics Anonymous. He walked right with me into Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God I didn't have to be in a certain place in a certain mental state for him to help me. And he welcomed me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm so pleased about that. I had lunch with John last week, and I thanked him again for greeting me into Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the group I got sober in had about 18 people in it. 10 are still sober. That's over 33 years plus. And 4 of them died sober. So that means 4, we lost only 4. People want to tell me today AA don't work. AA works fine if you're working it. You know, I'm all for other things helping you, but keep them out of AA. You know, keep them out of AA. Talk about the book. Talk about a program. Because we're killing people with that stuff. We're losing people right and left. And it makes me sad because Alcoholics Anonymous is what healed me when they told me nothing could. I had been committed to the Iowa State Mental Institution, termed psychotic, neurotic, insanely violent, hopelessly addicted to drugs, and chronic alcoholic, and I thought, thanks for the vote of confidence, you know. I was 18 years old. They had me doing the Thorazine shuffle. But I liked being there because they said, if you get upset, tell us, we'll give you something. It's time to get upset. No. Now they're doing the same thing and say it's a new therapy. Still doesn't work, in my opinion. I started going to meetings and people were kind to me. I couldn't figure it out because people were real nice to me. I was sitting there, I was about 3 weeks sober, and there was some guy sitting there, and I looked at him and I said, what do these people want from me? And he looked at me and said, what do you got that anybody'd want? No need to get personal, you know. Isn't it funny what goes on in our heads, though? And you know, I came to AA and they brought up that 3-letter word. You know the one I'm talking about. Job. You know, John. Makes you nervous. Then they brought up that other 3-letter word, God. And I was, as the word described in the book, I was violently anti-religious. I absolutely drop you. You brought that crap around me, buddy. Because God, my life, God had ripped people out of my life time and time again. How'd I know that? You told me. When I was young, I had a cousin named Linda. Linda was wonderful. If there was anybody close to God, it was Linda. She honor class, straight A's, full scholarship. She was beautiful. She did everything right. Hated her. Because I always compared my insides to their outsides. I couldn't come up. But she was wonderful, and she was walking across the street one day, and somebody hit her with a truck and killed her. Knocked her 200 feet. And you know what people told me? God must have wanted an angel. I thought, oh, so he hit you with the truck. I'll pass. You know. God news for you, still will. That's got nothing to do with God. That has to do with human error that I didn't know it then. It's funny because my office is on that very corner. And every day when I walk to work, I celebrate Linda's life. Because I learned a long time ago that if I'm going to grieve, let's make it about a celebration rather than all about me. I had a guy walk into my office about 6 months ago, and it was Monday. And I said, how you doing? He said, well, I'm going to be really depressed Friday. And I thought, well, at least you're scheduling them. That's good. You know. And I said, why is that? And he said, and he got some tears in his eyes, and he said, it's the anniversary of my daughter's death. And I said, oh, why don't you spend the whole day celebrating her life? Every smile you've ever seen, every good time you ever had, and just celebrate her memory. Or why don't you make it all about you? He got annoyed with me. And I know why he did. We love to play victim, and it's always got to be about us. We'll wring every bit of pain out of every kind of situation. Hear them in meetings all the time. Oh, yeah, 42 years ago somebody looked at me funny. And it's that bag of ones I'm talking about. It's that bag of ones. And you'll hear later in my story where I've lost a lot of people I love dearly by unfortunate and unconventional means, I promise you. But I don't disgrace them by making it about me. I celebrate the goodness they were in my life because I don't collect ones anymore. I'm looking for the 299s. And I don't have sadness in my life anymore for people that passed. In fact, with my belief today, I know they're better than I am, and I'm pretty good. I remember going to meetings and they brought up that God stuff, and I just got annoyed with it. And somebody said, you can make up your own God. And I thought, really? And they said, yeah. I can make it up? Yeah. So I thought, my God's going to be kind and loving and forgiving. Guess I showed them. Huh? They didn't seem to mind. You know. But that's any original idea we have. They act like they had it before, you know. And the reason I tell you that is that was so far away from the concept of God that I had. It's exactly the God I have today. But it was so far from the concept I had of God when I got sober. I am so grateful step 2 says a power greater than myself rather than God. Because I would have been tipping over tables and fighting people. Don't bring it around me. I used to say I was an atheist, maybe an agnostic, and I realized I was neither. I hated everything I knew about God. But I remind you, I'm a collector of ones. This God makes children starve, kills my cousin by trucks, makes us go hungry when we're kids, because God is responsible for everything. Every time my mother got beat up, every time the police came, every time my dad got thrown away, God is responsible for everything. So I really didn't need to hear about God until step 3. I need to hear about a power greater than myself. And God became good, others do. There was a lot of people in AA being real nice to me for no particular reason. And I love that. And you know, a lot of people say it doesn't matter what you say in AA. I beg to differ with you. There was a little guy named Harry when I got sober. Harry Stevens was about this tall. He's passed away now. And he was about this tall, about this big around. He poured coffee in the group. And when I got sober, they didn't have treatment centers per se. You just kind of shook it out. And, is there any shakers in here? Raise your hand. God, there's got to. Oh, thank you. Yeah, good shakers. I love it. How you doing? Oh, good. Yeah, you? You doing okay, Ed? Yeah. Want some coffee? Oh, no. And I had 2 rules. Don't touch me and don't come up behind me. 2 rules. Thank God Harry didn't care. Because Harry'd pour the coffee and he'd come up around me. And it's funny because they have the meeting now in the same place they used to have it back then. And whenever I can, I go sit in that same chair. And Harry'd come up behind me and he'd put his hand on my shoulder. And he'd pour coffee. And for some reason, everything was okay. I could breathe deeply. My head stopped. The madness stopped. And Harry'd take his time and he'd pour that coffee. And then he'd go and the madness would begin again. And I'd drink that coffee just as quick as I could. So Harry'd come back and put his hand on my shoulder. You see, big tough guy like me. I didn't know how to tell you thank you, Harry, for touching me. Just out of unconditional love. You want nothing but better for me. Thank you for taking the risk of touching me against my rules. Years later, there was a guy out in California when I moved out there. His name was Jimmy R. And he was from Texas, and he was rapid fire Texan. He'd talk like this, and he'd rub his hands together, he's just rapid fire. He said one day I asked some psychologist why I rubbed my hands together like this. He told me, he said, I smacked him right in the mouth. But I had gone through a time of deep, deep, dark depression in my sobriety, and I am one of those that I've used the steps and nothing else. I know that upsets people. Pray for me. And I don't want to hear your story because I don't want to hear the rationalization. I know it works for me, and I know it works for the people I work with. But I was in a difficult day that day. Man, it was just black. It was just black, and I'd have black days. And I walked into the club, and my plan was to go to my sponsor's house and turn on the gas and the coffee pots in the garage and just lay down because I was living in his garage. Just lay down and go to sleep. No notes, no dramatics, just be gone. Because I knew 2 things at that point. At least I thought I knew. That AA may work for you, but it didn't work for me. And that not drinking and not using is not doing it for me. I eventually had to take suicide off the option list too. It took me a while to do that. But that's where I was going. I was going to go home, turn on the gas, and I stopped into the club, and Jimmy was standing there. And I walked up to Jimmy, and I said, "Hi, Jimmy, how are you?" And it was like the world stopped. And Jimmy looked me right in the eye. And he said, "I'm much better for seeing you today, my friend. I'm much better for seeing you." And I need to tell you, Jimmy saved my life. Because if a nice guy like Jimmy thought I was worth saving, maybe I'm wrong. And I didn't turn on the gas that day. It matters what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. It matters what we say. There's a lot of sarcastic humor that goes around, and I used to be excellent at it. I'm not saying that proudly. But that isn't what we're about. If you break down the word sarcasm, it goes down to the Greek word of ripping of flesh. And I became excellent at it. And I appreciate David saying what he said today, because I always want to honor your presence. Wherever I meet you, I want to take time to honor your presence, because you've certainly honored mine since the day I come in here. And I don't care what job you're doing. I want to say thank you, and I want to honor your presence, because that's the way you made me feel today. Nothing about me. It's all about you and a God that I come to understand. I remember I was about 6 months sober, and that's when you get the honesty part. You get tacked about 8 months. I'd suggest you wait for the tack, just my 2 cents. And there was a priest in my group, and he had thin blue lips. Yeah, priests have it too, rabbis have it, all thin blue lips. And he said, "Ed, why don't you come back to church?" And I said, "I'll tell you why I don't go back to church. It's full of thieves, hypocrites, and liars." Felt pretty good about telling him, too. I don't mind. He looked back at me and said, "Well, why don't you come? One more won't hurt." Did my best not to talk to him anymore, I'll tell you. But thank God people said things like that to me. Thank God they would speak the truth to me. Thank God they loved me enough to tell me the truth. Because I was a scary guy when I came here. I had a lot of bad habits. I came off the streets. I was crazed. And people loved me. They brought me into their house and they fed me. And they let me watch the kids. They trusted me in the house all by myself. Didn't think I was going to steal nothing. I'd never had that before. They loved me when I didn't know what love was about. I really worked hard, but I made a mistake my first year sober, and I want to share it with you. I made a mistake I hear a lot of people making when they come and talk to me. They started professing a faith they didn't have, and that's exactly what I did. You know, you sit around AA, you hear old-timers talk about God, and you can look in their eyes and you can tell they're telling the truth. They know what's going on. And I couldn't figure out their angle, so I started parroting what they were saying. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. How you doing, Ed? Oh, fine. Fine. You? Nice to see you. Mind if I choke you a minute? Nah. But if you ask me, I was doing fine and God was good. Now that's where we're supposed to go. And I understand people say act as if. I'm not a big proponent of act as if. I'm a big proponent to start where you're at. Be real about it. And if you don't buy this whole God deal, excellent. Start right there. I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't avail myself of a sponsor the first 2.5 years sober. I would not recommend that to anybody. I had a big problem that I didn't think I was worth your time. Now when somebody says that to me, I almost cry because I know that loneliness and I know that feeling. I wishing I had somebody to talk to. But I don't want to bother anybody because I'm not worth it. I started professing a faith I didn't have, and people were nice to me, and all of a sudden I got a year's sobriety. And I remember the day I got a year, the guy down here at the end of the old-timers meeting yesterday was talking about, I couldn't believe I had a year. I checked myself. Are you sure, Ed? That's a long time. And it was true. And it was amazing. And shortly after I had that year, my dad asked me over for supper. Now, your dad may ask you over for dinner a lot. Mine did when you were in trouble. Okay? And I hadn't lived at the house for a long time, but I happened to be in the neighborhood. And I'd been working up in in Minnesota for a while at a treatment center up there. I became an expert. Thank God I grew out of that. But when I'd come back home and he asked me to dinner, and I was a little nervous about it, but you guys had ruined me. You told me I had to bring a new attitude into old situations, that it doesn't matter how they act. What matters is how I behave. This is my job. I'm in charge of what's right under these feet. This, one day at a time. And that's how I behave. You taught me things like feelings were not facts. I never knew that. I, honest to God, didn't know that. I thought if I felt it, it was the truth. You told me I had to bring new attitudes into old situations, that if anything was going to change, it had to start with me. So I showed up for that supper, and got about halfway through supper, and Dad said, boy, and I thought, oh, here it comes. He said, just wanted to tell you I'm proud of you. Now, I need to tell you something. When I walked in there, if you hooked up a lie detector to me and asked me if I cared what that old man thought, I would have said no, and would have said true. Because I could lie to me good. That night he told me he was proud of me. It was one of the best nights of my life ever. I'm so grateful I was so wrong. And I've been so grateful I've been so wrong about so many things since I've gotten sober. When I got sober, they promised me miracles. That wasn't even on the list. That was far beyond my comprehension, the old man ever saying he was proud of me. And he was. You see, I never looked at the other side. He did everything he could to keep his baby boy from screwing up. I remember the night I got kicked out of school, all schools, for good. And I came home and he started wailing on me with his fists. And when he got done, I looked at him and said, are you finished? And walked away. For one of the few times in my life, I saw my father cry. Because he didn't know what to do with me. And you had taken me from that point to a point in one short year of him telling me he's proud of me. It was one of the best nights of my life. And I went to a meeting that night, and then I went to my sister-in-law's afterwards, and shortly afterwards I got a call from my mother who was crying and hysterical, and she said, Ed, come home quick. And I said, Mom, what's wrong? She said, Dad went across the street to get him a quart of beer and me a bottle of pop, and now they're carrying bodies out, and I don't know what's going on. And I drove across town, and it was one of those ice storm nights. You ever get those quarter-inch of ice over everything out here? It was one of those nights. And I pulled up in front of that bar where I'd spent drinking since I was 11. And for all rights, I should have been there that night. I pulled up in front of there and I saw more cops than I've ever seen ever. And I don't know if I told you I was a cop fighter. That's really not too smart. If you're a cop fighter, I'll give you a little flash. There's always more of them. I didn't seem to get that down. I mean it. If I saw a badge, I don't care if you were a crossing guard, I'd punch you. You know, just, yeah, total sanity. You know. But those guys who'd watched me work in the court that past year, at that time they let AA just come in. If somebody had a problem, they'd let them just give them to us and let them take them to meetings, and people would stay sober and lives would change. And so the cops knew I was sober because they saw me about every day down there. And I walked in there, and there was one officer there, and he said, "Ed, what are you doing here?" And I said, "My dad was in here." He said, "Oh, my God, Ed." And I said, "Why? What's going on?" He said, "Ed, all we know is somebody came in and opened fire and shot everybody." And I looked down that bar, and I saw a pool of my father's blood with his glasses all smashed up in it. And I knew what was going on, but I didn't want to know. You don't want to know those things. And I got sad inside. And they told me that they'd taken everybody up to the hospital and I should go up there and see if my dad was up there. And I went up there, and there was an officer up there that hadn't forgotten my past. And he was rude and he was vulgar and he thought he was about halfway tough, and he told me to get out of there before he'd have me arrested. He'd identified all the bodies and Dad wasn't one of them. And an AA miracle happened. I said, okay, and I left. A year and a half before that, they would have been looking for a new lieutenant. And I went down and I called the officer that for the last 5 years of my drinking and using tried his best to put me away. And only by God's grace did he not. I'd tell you I was hip, slick, and cool, but I was a loser from the word go and didn't know how to do half the stuff I was doing. And that's who I called. And I called him because I knew he knew I was sober. And I said, "Bob, my dad was in that tavern." He said, "Oh, my God, Ed, hold on." And he fed me information. Now, you know he's not supposed to do that. But he kept asking me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, Bob, I'm okay." Years later, he used to pull me aside and he said, "You know, Ed, there's a lot of times when I wanted to quit the force, I'd get so fed up and then you'd come to mind. And if a guy like you could make it, it gave me hope that maybe somebody else could, so I could go to work that day." You see, you don't know what your example's doing to somebody in your life. You may not even know you're doing it for. Bob and I came up with a couple conclusions. One, that he had either been shot and taken hostage, or shot and wandered outside. So we formed a search party, and we searched the streets all night. And I hadn't had that experience except last Sunday. I was walking on Ground Zero in New York City. And I felt once again the hopelessness of looking for somebody you love. You don't want to look, but you got to look. You got to look under the parked cars. You got to look in the garbage cans. You don't want to look, but you got to look. And just the horror of needless homicide and violence. It's just horrible, and I'd always hoped you wouldn't know that. And then September 11th happened, and everybody knew that. My wife is from another country, and she used to say to me, "Ed, the United States is spoiled rotten. They've never spilled blood on your soil to protect and come after you. You don't know." She was from Turkey. And on September 11th, I called her and I said, "We're not spoiled anymore?" She said, "No, honey, you're not." And I don't know why we had to learn that lesson. And I don't know why I had to go through that night, but I know this, that God's grace will bring goodness even out of the worst of situations. The most horrifying I can ever imagine, He's used to heal and help people. About 8 o'clock the next morning, that officer called me and said, "Ed, you want to come up here and identify your old man?" Anybody could have made a mistake. And I said, "Sure." And I went up and I went into that morgue and I saw my dad laying there with that bullet hole in his face, and I just got cold inside, and there was some doctor standing next to me trying to tell me how the bullet entered the brain and through his jaw and exploded, and I said, "Yeah, I don't really need that information, thank you." And I don't know that I've ever been more lost or more sad than standing there. Because remember where I started this talking about a faith? I reached for that faith that I said I had, and I came up with nothing. God, that's a horrible feeling. But you see, God takes care of me. Always has, always will. I walked out of that morgue, and right there was sitting a member of AA who gave me a little wink and a little thumbs up. You see, God takes care of me. Everywhere I am, God is. And if He can't be there in person, He'll send one of His kids. Just give me a little wink and a little nod. Let me know it's going to be all right, even when I know it's impossible for it to be all right. You can't feel this pain. You can't feel this way and be all right. And the answer is yes, you can. You see, that's how you know this program works. If it's all about good times, it's not worth much. It's about when your heart's been broken and your dreams have been shattered and you can still stand sober one day at a time. That's what this program is to me. I love feeling wonderful, but it's equally important that I can stand erect when everything around me is falling apart. And if I can't stand erect, I got members on each side of me holding me up. So I can be current and present. I would trade that for the world. Went to my father's funeral, and the priest said something that changed my life. Gave me one of the keys to the kingdom. At his funeral, Father Grubb said, you know, a lot of people would say Clifford's death is God's will. He said, I don't believe that, and I sat right up in the pew because I told you about what I thought about God. He said, I believe God created human beings, gave them a free will. Some of them chose to do this act, and now it's God's will. And I thought, you mean the reason kids are starving is because we're not feeding them and want to blame God? Exactly right. They're His children too. You mean the reason cancer is rampant and is because we pollute everything we touch and want to blame everybody else? That's right. God created us not for us to destroy ourselves. You mean God didn't hit Linda with the truck? No, there was human error. And there was a lot of sadness. And God cried that day too, because that was His daughter. And for the first time in my life, I could stand straight up and say, maybe my God is kind and loving and forgiving. Maybe. And I went about my business. It was like the weight of the world fell off my shoulders. Shortly after that, I remember being in the courtroom sitting across from this guy. He had his little do going, thinking he was tough, and I'm thinking, give me 5 minutes, we won't need a trial. In fact, bring all 5 of them in. I'll make quick business of this nonsense. But you guys had ruined me. You told me I might be the only example of AA somebody might ever see. So if I go into that courtroom, I have to act like I got some sense. I'd never done that in a courtroom before. And I said, how do you do that? And they said, simply answer the questions they ask and don't be a smart aleck. They didn't say smart aleck, but similar. Don't be a smart aleck about it. So that's what I did. I dressed up in my finest suit that just fit perfect because I'd always worn suits. And I went to court. And the judge asked me, and I'm looking at this guy, and the county attorney and them ask me questions. I get up and leave, and I go. And for all pretents and purposes, I closed that case in my head. Because I'd learned early on that if you keep anger and resentment inside of you, you're the one that destroys. At 2 o'clock in the morning when you're up resenting somebody, I promise you, they're home getting a good night's sleep. Who's it hurting? You know? And for some reason I knew that. And God talked to me shortly thereafter. Now, you got to be careful when God talks to you. I got a few other friends God talked to. They'll be out in about 30 years. But God talked to me and said, Ed, go out to California. Go into show business. I looked at my resume. Made perfect sense to me. So I went to where all stars get their start, Anaheim, California. I got a job at Disneyland. I was goofy. Little did they know how well I fit the role. 2.5 years sober, no sponsor, not reading the big book anymore, a little hostile. Yeah, I'm goofy. And I didn't actually take that job. I went up to a meeting in West LA and I walked in and there was an excitement about Alcoholics Anonymous. Very, very similar to what I've experienced here. There was an enthusiasm about Alcoholics Anonymous. They were doing more than sitting around taking chips and telling people they were too busy to help somebody else. They were actually working the program. And it was marvelous. I just loved it. And I went up the next week and the same excitement was there. And this guy was standing there. I said, excuse me, would you be my sponsor? He said, no. And I kind of knew the A&A rules. You had to say yeah to an AA request. You know. And he come up in a few minutes later and I said, why not? And he said, anybody I sponsor has to look up to me. I thought, oh, tall jokes, real cute. We like those. Because I would have believed you and I would have died. You would have killed me with your opinion. You would have killed me. I'd be dead, because I've heard some of that stuff. And I would have never gone there. To the very guy who, through God's grace, saved my life. I try to make it my business not to put down any group or individual in AA. Who the hell do I think I am? I have no right to bias your opinion. I may not like what they're doing. Well, I won't go there. But I welcome you to make your own choice. I welcome you to do whatever you need to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, to get sober and stay sober one day at a time. That's what we're here about. Not character assassination and gossip and one-upsmanship and all that kind of crap. That's not Alcoholics Anonymous that I know. And Clancy, I remember, he said, you don't get locked up for how you think, you get locked up for how you act. Well, that made sense. He said, you can think anything you want, watch how you act. I said, oh, okay. And he pulled a few strings, and I got a job as a bellhop from 11 to 7. Same outfit. It was a nice little blue coat that went like this, and coat like this, and a little blue hat, and I'd sit there from 11 to 7. Little old ladies would come in and drop their bag on my foot. Pick up that bag, boy. And I'd think, which one? You were it. I'm allowed to think that. What I did is say, yes, ma'am, and I'd go upstairs and I'd put the bag in the room and I'd unbuckle the suitcase and go to the door and wait for my tip. They'd slam the door and like to break my fingers. And I'm thinking, I'm going to kick in the door, grab this old broad door, out the door, watch her splatter. But what I did is say, thank you, and went downstairs. Doesn't sound like much, does it? One of the greatest reasons I'm here is called the third step. We pray it all the time. It's called freedom from the bondage of self. Just because I think it doesn't mean I have to do it. And feelings are not facts. I get tickled with people working on how they feel so much. It's like Thursday, they're going to change anyway, But as long as it's all about me, I'll keep paying, Yeah, it's crazy. He made me do things. He made me write an inventory and take it with him. I thought that was kind of pushy. He said he wanted me to tell the truth and then he held me accountable for what I did and made me go through all the steps in order. I'm not a cafeteria guy. Well, I am, but not in the program. Simply because I don't believe that works. You can usually look in the expression and pay people that do it that way. Or the people who say, I've been around 25 years, I've never taken a 4-step. Gee, you couldn't tell. I believe that the program is the program, and if you're working your program, then it has nothing to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sorry. But that's the program. That's the one I want to work. And that's where I get it. It's right out of the book. And he insisted that I could do better than I think I could. I remember I was going to Pasadena, California, and was going to talk at a meeting. And right before I went to the meeting, I thought, ooh, Pasadena, wealthy area. I may hook up with a job. And I caught myself doing this little con. And I did something very important that I suggested to you a little while ago. I started all over with God. My first honest prayer ever was, God, I don't know if you're there or not. I hope so. I sure hope so. I'd never been honest with God before. And I was a few years sober at that point. But I started where I was at. Because that's the only place you can grow from, is starting where you're at. And I went in my bathroom and I said a prayer, the same prayer I said before I come down here to talk. And I got down on my knees and I said, God, save me from my own nonsense tonight. I didn't used to say nonsense. I said another word, quite descriptive. But I said, save me from my own nonsense and let me just share the miracle you've performed in my life through Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want absolutely nothing from any of these people. Nothing. And I went to that meeting and I talked, and the guy came up to me afterwards and said, makes no sense to me. Want to offer you a job? I said, makes perfect sense to me. He said, have you ever been in Taiwan? I said, no. He said, have you ever been in show business management? I said, no. He said, be in my office Monday morning. I suited up and showed up, went to his office Monday morning. On Thursday, I was lifting out of LAX, Los Angeles International Airport, on China Airlines. I was going to Taipei, Taiwan. I was soon to be vice president of America on Ice. I had a cast of 62. I was flying over to Taipei to negotiate contracts with the Taiwanese government and fly back and forth to Hong Kong with designer Bill Campbell to design costumes. How was your week? Now, I'll tell you why I share that with you. Somewhere along the line, I dropped my bag of ones. Where people like me don't do things like that. I'm the only one who's ever kept me from anything I wanted to do. And you told me I didn't have to do that anymore. And I landed in Taipei, and everybody's this tall. And they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Mark? Yeah. And I knew it was just about a time before they tied me down. But I had an absolutely wonderful time there, and I don't have time to go into it, but I need to share this with you. I was put in that situation to show me gifts and talents that I had that I never would have believed unless I'd seen them with my own eyes. I accomplished things over there in show business history that had never been accomplished before. And the only reason I knew I did it is because I was there. And I did it on the natch. God has blessed me with a wonderful brain. You know, John has a photographic memory. I do too. I just never got the developer. You know, if I had the developer, it'd be good. You know? But I was over there, and I was in Kaohsiung, southern part of Taipei, and a guy walked past me one day and said, "You know, you'd be an excellent manager for the Harlem Globetrotters." And I went, "Yeah, sure." I went home to Los Angeles, and I got a call in about 3 months, and they said, "Is this Ed Newton?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We've heard wonderful things about you. This is the Harlem Globetrotters. Would you come in and talk to us?" Thank God for me being in control of my destiny, huh? And I suited up and I showed up. And I did the interview. And short 8 hours later, I was the new manager of the Harlem Globetrotters. You see, when I got sober, you said to me to grab onto my dreams again. And I had some good dreams, I'll tell you. My dreams was, I'm going to travel all over the world and meet famous people. And I'm going to go first class, too. Now, from where I come from, you know that's a possible dream. But where we come from, we know it's just another day in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't tell you what it was like when I stepped out on the floor of Madison Square Gardens, and I'm the manager of Harlem Globetrotters. And you know, there was only one real quiet, wonderful time in my house. It came about January on Wide World of Sports. And there was this basketball team that come on that Dad just loved, and Mom just loved, and his kids just loved. And they'd start doing this sweet Georgia Brown song. Dad would smile, and Mom would smile, and the family would smile. It's the only time I ever remember my family smiling. Can you imagine how I felt when they started Sweet Georgia Brown? And I thought, man, it doesn't get any better than this. And I'm pleased to report that I'm wrong. You see, my God is good. And the best is yet to come. I just got a thumbnail sketch of this baby. That's all I got. I don't know a whole lot, but I know God's good. And I know I found him here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to London, met the daughter of the Turkish ambassador. She was Muslim, beautiful, wealthy. I thought, well, our backgrounds are a lot alike. And so we got married. And there's no polite way to say this. We should have never got married. It was a bad deal. We had 3 children, and I loved my children, but I need to tell you, too, that they absolutely detest me. They will not talk to me, and they think I'm pretty much the scum of the earth, and have for the last 16 years. So you members of Al-Anon, I really appreciate what you're doing. It means more to me than you'll ever know. And about 6 months ago, I had to let my children go, because for 17 years it was a lot of abuse. Because all they know is what happened 20 years ago, and it's one side. And the healing can't begin. And I share that with you to simply tell you this. Being happy isn't about having all your problems resolved. You can be happy without problems being resolved. About 6 months ago, I got a bill for $500,000. California's claiming I never paid any child support. Iowa's got records that I did. And California says, we don't care. You owe us $500,000. You know what I did? I opened that letter and laughed and said, God, can't wait to see what you're going to do with this mess. Got nothing to do with me, man. And I can live my life today. That's the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to be all cool and all in your little compartments to be happy, joyous, and free. You can do it anytime you want. And I just share that because I know there's some guys out there estranged from their wives and bitter things are told. And I just pray for my wife every day, ex-wife every day, that she finds some peace. Because there's going to be hell to pay for what she's done one of these days. You see, I know that because I put that into other people's lives too. So I pray for her every day. and my children every day. And I don't even pray that they love me. I just pray that they find some peace. If hating me is how they get peaceful, let it be. You know. About 10 years ago, I lost everything I owned. Need to tell you that. I had become what I had rather than who I was. It's very easy to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I became a big deal. I was driving a Mercedes, living in Burbank, across from NBC studios, and had all the stuff and made some decisions based on self that later placed me in a position to be hurt. Lost everything I had. And at 18 years sober, I'm bankrupt. Within 3 months, it's gone. And it was one of the better things that happened to me because I didn't know that I had become what I owned and not who I was. And where I'd been and not who I was. You know the only reason I tell you the story about the Harlem Globetrotters? Because my sponsor insists on it. That was 22 years ago. Don't mean a whole lot to me anymore. But if you're new tonight, it's a story of a miracle that needs to be shared. I lost everything and I moved back to Iowa and moved into my old neighborhood. And they let a friend of mine who owns, John, who's in AA, owns a lot of property. He had some abandoned houses, and the city let me pry the wood off the windows and turn the electric on. They turned their head the other way. And I had a little bed in the corner, and I had my big book. I had a mattress in the corner in my big book, and I opened it up and thought, I got to have something wrong here, because happy, joyous, and free isn't how I feel. And I've come to believe that the book isn't wrong. Probably what I'm doing is. So if I want to be happy, joyous, and free, I need to follow the instructions. And I got to start all over again. You know, that's what I love about AA. You're going to make mistakes, and I promise you this, you will never get drunk for making mistakes. But you'll get drunk if you start defending them. That's been my experience. You're going to make mistakes. If you're trying, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Just cop to it and get up and go again. And stay sober one day at a time. I'm not a big guy to tell me that you've got a reason to slip. Doesn't register in my book. Since I've been sober, my father was murdered, watched my mother die of cancer, had 2 brothers killed by drunk drivers, another brother committed suicide, another sister-in-law committed suicide, another brother-in-law put a gun to his head, was a vegetable for 2 years, been married, divorced, lost everything I owned. I don't need a slip. I need a meeting. Don't tell me that it don't work. About 10 years ago, I went on a Christian retreat, and it was absolutely wonderful. I didn't mean to go. No, I was working with this guy, and he, his son came to me, and you know how it is. They always want to thank you, and we know it's God working through us, but it's God. And I learned a long time ago that when someone offers you a gift, simply say, thank you. Boy, that was tough for me. And he said, I want to sponsor you on this retreat. And I just went, thank you. Because that's what I'm supposed to do. My job is not to destroy the spirit of the giver. I have no idea why you're doing that. It may be an amend, it may be something you need to do. And I need to be gracious enough to simply say thank you and get my ego out of it. Went on this retreat, and on a Saturday night I had a spiritual experience very similar to what Bill Wilson had, or at least what I've read. It was a moment in time that changed my heart and my mind, and that preparation was done, all in Alcoholics Anonymous, and continues in Alcoholics Anonymous. I came to believe in a power greater than myself, known as Christ. And I know that upsets somebody. You know, this is the strangest place in the world. Because I was talking at a convention a while back, and this girl's higher power was up and to the right. That was her higher power, up and to the right. And we welcome that. But God forbid if somebody say they believe in Christ or some organized religion, we almost run them out. What kind of sick crap is that? You know? No, really. You're entitled to have any God you want. Guarantee it. Because it's your God. And you have it and you talk about it. Don't try to convert, folks. You'll be escorted quickly. But you can share your experience, strength, and hope. And I love that about AA. God said, I want you to be a minister. And I thought, okay. And 2 years before that, when I quit smoking, God said, I want you to get an education. And I did what any good alcoholic would do. I went, la, 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 la. But I went over and I had 60 hours in, and I had this spiritual awakening, and within 3 weeks I was a minister, And I was doing services, and I'd never done any of that before, but God put me there, so I guess I know how to do it. And it was a wonderful time. They told me I had to complete my BA and then get my little 96-hour Master's of Divinity. It took me 7 years, one day at a time, and I did that. I didn't miss a meeting. I didn't miss a commitment. I worked full time, went to school full time. I'm not one to tell me you don't have time to improve your life. You know, you just don't want to make time. You like sitting in the rut you're in, you know. You know, we're funny people. Some people go through ruts and come out the other side. I'm the type of person that if I'm not real careful, I'll get into a rut and start hanging pictures. Looks like I'm going to be here a while. And what AA asked us to do is come on out the rut. Come on out the rut. So I did. And I remember started serving churches, and I've never missed a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I do not get my faith mixed up. I found my God here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I served my God in the church, but this is where I got sober, and I defy any pastor to tell me I don't believe in God. But I also believe in this ministry that saved my life. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous, who invites any and all to come in and be healed from a hopeless state of mind and body, that we are to be reborn. That ain't scripture, that's big book. And God, I loved it. Honors that I was given. I remember the first time somebody was dying and I loved them. And they said to me, Ed, when that day comes, would you be there with me? And I was silly because I said, yes, I would, and I realized that's not in my jurisdiction. The answer is yes, I will if I can be. But I said, yes, I would, in God's grace. I was there. But what she said to me touched my heart deeper than I can tell you. She said, somebody answer the phone. Yeah. She said, one of the last faces I see on earth, I want it to be yours. You know, when I came into these rooms, nobody wanted to be around me at all. My best judgment had created a monster that I didn't like either. And you created a person in me that people wanted to spend their last moments with, doing what? Praying and thanking God for their life. I've heard many stories this weekend of a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous who just died that was a sponsor to some people. And the excellent example he set, quite the way he passed. I want to thank Bob for that, because he's touched my life too. We're here to be the best examples we can be. You can shortcut all you want, but I want to be the best example I can be. When I come into your life, I want you to know that you've been loved powerfully and what you have to say is important and that you're important in my life. My prayer everywhere before I go and talk is, God, let me lead my very soul there, because that's all I got of value to me. About 2 years ago, I was in the Methodist Church for 8 years, and I was in a 1,200-member church, and they came and said I had agreement that one Sunday a month I could go and speak in AA, and got a new bishop in, and he said, Ed, you need to give up speaking in AA if you're going to stay with this church. And boy, that was a tough decision, because I found out the 299s are everywhere. They're not just in AA. They're everywhere I go. Everywhere I look, I find the 299s. Everywhere. And that was tough, because those folks loved me. It was tough in one way, yet quite clear in the other. And when I left, they had a roast for Pastor Ed. 450 people showed up for that roast. One person got up and said, we don't even jokingly want to say anything bad about Pastor Ed. We're just here to tell him that we love him, and we thank him, and we believe in what he's doing, and we'll be praying for him. And thank you for all you've given us. Nobody would even say hi to me when I got here, some places. And you made it so people love me beyond my wildest imagination. And the thing I need to share with you is it's not about me being special. I'm average at best. But it's about Alcoholics Anonymous being special. It's about God being special. Shortly before I came in here, I took the registration. I prayed for each and every one of you by name individually. And I do that because that's the most I can do for you. What did I pray for? For whatever you believe God is, that it be fullest and revealed to you tonight. That you have clarity and purpose in whatever you need to do. But most of all, you come to know a God that you can understand and love and experience the same peace He's granted me. It's the most I can do for you. I thank you for making another day of my life, walking on the sunlight of the Spirit, being full, being refreshed, and being renewed one day at a time. Thank you.